Hi, I'm Ann Gaviola. Welcome to the Peak on Global, where we break down what is trending in the business world and what you need to know to stay ahead of the curve. And joining me, as always, is Brett Chang from the Peak Podcast. Welcome, Brett.
Hey, Ann, great to be with you.
Let's get right into it and talk about something I'd like to call the summer of strikes. So we've seen an uptick in labor unrest, from BC port workers to screenwriters across the continent to metro grocery workers in the Greater Toronto area. This is kind of a push to redistribute corporate profits to workers as opposed to executives and shareholders, to workers from coast to coast, really pushing back against their eroding purchasing power, and as many feel, not being fairly compensated for being in the proverbial trenches on the job. What are your thoughts on this, Brett?
Well, this is a multi-decade trend that's now coming, I think, to a boiling point, which is that there has been a growing inequality between the haves and the have-nots, and those who have asset ownership, the executives, the shareholders, as you mentioned, they're earning disproportionately more than the workers and the actual people that are on the line day to day. And so now these workers are organizing, and in many cases, rightfully so, to get more of their fair share, to create a more equal deal for them. The bigger challenge for workers in this country is that on top of the growing inequality, there is obviously inflation, there's a housing crisis, there are all these additional factors that are making life in this country and North America at large very expensive. And so there has to be a reckoning at a certain point where these workers are earning enough to be able to afford to live in our cities and towns, while at the same time, these businesses need to find a way to better distribute, like you said, those profits to workers and make for a more equal and fair deal.
Yeah, many analysts look at this and say this is long overdue, but also a little word of caution in that this kind of wage increases in many industries, that could actually be inflationary. Now, analysts that I spoke with also tell me the conditions are in place for these strikes to continue into the fall. And there is kind of a ripple effect, because what's agreed upon at the negotiating table sets the new standard, the new table stakes, if you will, for other workers within the industry. We saw that when the WestJet Pilots Union was bargaining. What they were doing is they were riding the wave of momentum and collective bargaining success they achieved for pilots in the U.S. So it's not just contained to the people who are currently on the picket line.
That's right. And I think that is probably good news for workers at large, which is now hopefully these workers currently on strike who are negotiating new collective bargaining agreements will be able to set new precedents that will push wages up higher throughout many different industries. And sure, while there may be some inflationary pressure, I think if you look at the impact that corporate profits have and the accumulation of corporate profits and how those are spent, that is equally inflationary pressure applied on the economy. And so I think it goes both ways, but ultimately, you can't have a country where people can't afford to live in the cities in which they work. And that's ultimately the problem that we're running into. And so something has to give on that. Yeah, it may create this bit of a wage price spiral, but ultimately, if you can't have workers living in the cities doing the jobs that they have to do, there's a much bigger crisis at hand.
Really, really good points, Brett, and thanks for making them so succinctly. Now, speaking of that ripple effect, we saw stock markets slump on news that ratings agency Fitch downgraded U.S. debt from AAA to AA+. The two main reasons cited: governance issues that have spiraled, as well as the constant debt ceiling debacles, political showdowns. So this is now the second major ratings agency to strip America of its gold star AAA rating after Standard & Poor's. Are you worried about this, Brett?
I don't think it means anything at all. In fact, I don't even think they should rate U.S. government debt. In the end, U.S. government debt is U.S. government debt. That is the most secured debt in the world. It's secured primarily by the U.S. military and the state. And I don't think anybody reasonably believes that the U.S. is going to actually default anytime soon, or that they're going to have any trouble paying the interest on this debt, considering that they own the largest reserve currency on the planet. So I think all of this is a bit of show, and I'm not even sure the credit rating agencies, if you look at their record in the 2008 subprime mortgage crisis, have the best record on this anyways.
Ooh.
So I'm not particularly concerned about it at all.
Ooh, you went there. Very true, Brett. Although I do think trends are interesting. And when you see, now two downgrades in a row, it can spell, or it can be kind of like where there's smoke, sometimes there is fire. Maybe we'll leave it at that. Okay, our final topic is something I like to call the Barbenheimer Phenomenon. And we can thank Barbie the movie and also Oppenheimer for giving Cineplex its biggest July on record. Some say this marks the return of box office profitability. This is significant, Brett, because neither of these films is a superhero movie or a Tom Cruise hero movie. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's great news for, I think, culture at large, and that there was this long period of what many people called stuck culture, where it was sequel after sequel
Oh, yeah.
that were becoming the big hits. And now to have some original films that are actually very popular and filling up theaters is great. But to tie it to the first point, the first topic that we just talked about today on the labor strife, one of the big issues right now in the entertainment industry is that the economics of streaming, they just don't work for really anybody. They don't work for the streamers themselves that are losing money on acquiring subscribers. They don't work for the writers and the producers of the content who are also not making as much money as they could be or were making back in the theater days. And I think that this could be a switch back away from streaming and towards theaters again. We're going to see less and less productions, big ticket productions airing on streaming first, but likely airing in movie theaters for a significant amount of time before going on streaming services, because just the economics are better. And now that they've proven that there is appetite for people to go to the movies and that they will go back to theaters after COVID, I think there'll likely be more and more of these movies coming into theaters. I think that's probably good and healthier for the industry at large, and maybe a path forward when you look at these labor negotiations with writers and actors.
Way to bring it all full circle. And my final question to you is, have you seen either of these movies?
I saw Oppenheimer 2 weeks ago. Excellent movie. Really enjoyed it. And I would recommend it. I'm hoping to see Barbie soon.
I think you should. I mean, I watched the Barbie movie with my family, and my husband watched both 2 weekends ago. I actually had no idea that Barbie would be so kind of intellectually stimulating, but it absolutely was. And to anyone who says it's just a big commercial for Mattel, I suggest you watch the movie more closely. The Mattel execs are portrayed as buffoons with Will Ferrell as their leader. And also, I wonder if these same people call, for example, the Transformers one big commercial, or Spider-Man or the X-Men series one big commercial. What's different about the Barbie movie that it is being attacked like this? We'll save the fact that watching it has become political for another discussion entirely. Thank you so much for your time and your insight, Brett.
You too, and have a good weekend.
You too. And you can get all your daily business news with the Peak Daily podcast. It is available for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you find your favorite podcasts.